What would happen if we took 1 week and set out to try to get as many Halo speedrunning world records as possible? Interestingly enough, if you look at the long history of Halo speedrunning, you would see that over the years, so many iconic speedrunners have etched their name into Halo history by achieving the fastest times throughout all of Halo. Whether it was individual level runs, full game runs, or cross game runs, time and time again over the years, champions would rise, claiming world records otherwise thought impossible. And while Luke and I don't have completely no experience in speedrunning, we one time had the Halo 3 ODST Uplift Reserve Co-op 3rd place easy difficulty time over there on Halo runs. And after that, we retired from all of speedrunning. It's time for us to come out of retirement. Do you guys hear that? Use code Sloth when you buy gamer subs. I won't waste your time with an ad read, but you could help us out. One thing that Luke and I think is really interesting across the entire speedrunning community beyond just Halo is the fact that typically any percent runs are really fascinating to look at. Essentially, it's a run category where anything goes as long as you start the game at the beginning and you end the game at the end. However, when it comes to Halo, any percent wasn't ever really a very popular category. Over the years, there's been so many different modifiers through skulls, and for the most part, when it comes to Halo, easy and legendary solo runs seem to be generally the most paid attention to categories, and then there's some interesting co-op categories occasionally. But with Halo MCC being out for a while and 343 adding in some extra modifiers over time, like the acrophobia skull, which would drastically change speedruns if there was a dedicated any percent category, the admins over at Halo Runs slowly started warming up to the idea of finally accepting runs and opening up categories for any skulls or acrophobia runs. And while once those were added, some players started running the levels individually, Luke and I happened to notice that as of yet, nobody has run any acrophobia co-op categories through Halo Runs just yet. And this was actually something incredibly exciting for us. Now, obviously, it seems like a meme. Yeah, there's a brand new category. We want to be the first people to take it so that we can have our name etched as a legacy because we're obviously the greatest Halo players ever. But as fans of the older Halo games, one thing we've always noticed whenever we would watch speedrunners, cover speedrunning topics, or just appreciate the long history of Halo runs as players who haven't been speedrunning Halo for multiple years and maybe are newer to the community of speedrunning itself, the threshold to even get started running is already incredibly high. I mean, at the end of the day, the speedrunning community has been around for such a long time that so many tricks and refinements have been mastered by many players, meaning that at an entry level, it's incredibly hard to jump on the speedrunning train. And while of course, all it takes is a new trick or discovery to be made where it breaks the entire way a level can be played, the addition of these categories were a massive deal to us because we loved playing Halo through acrophobia already. We've done multiple videos playing through the games with the acrophobia skull. So now we could solidify our names potentially as world record holders, even for a short amount of time before someone inevitably beats us, but in a game mode that we are specifically passionate about, in a way that we really enjoy playing the Halo games. So what better way than to start off in Halo 3 ODST? Now, of course, if we were just trying to speedrun getting a speedrun world record, we could have just submitted our first time playing through acrophobia, but we wanted to try a little bit harder than just doing the bare minimum here, so we actually did spend a little bit of time going through ODST and coming up with strategies and things to look out for when we would run the game when we were actually timing things. We actually did a few practice runs before we went ahead and started timing our run of Halo 3 ODST, but this is the general setup we went with when we were playing Halo 3 ODST in case any of you guys decide to try to run this and possibly beat our time. First up is prepare to drop. Now this level has an annoying built-in tutorial, but you can actually bypass it if you do a door bump, which is where one player walks into the very center of the door that you typically enter after doing the tutorial, and the other players kill themselves. Now since the acrophobia category allows for any skulls to be used beyond just acrophobia, and recently in an update, Halo 3 ODST added in some new skulls to the game, we also enabled the bandana skull, which allowed us to have unlimited ammo and grenades, which meant killing ourselves was a lot easier than what you would maybe run into in a regular co-op run, because sometimes 2 grenades won't kill yourself in ODST easy difficulty. You need to use extras, but we were just having a good time with all of the grenades here. This typically would mean we would be able to clip through the door quick enough, sometimes better than others, and from there, whoever clips through through first begins moving as fast as they can to the courtyard while telling the rest of the team that they're through so that they can die and respawn as well. We did run into an issue in one of our practice runs trying to get through this next door. Essentially, you want to do the same trick as before. However, if you don't kill all of the grunts in the courtyard, you're essentially unable to respawn. So clearing all of the grunts as quickly as possible is a major part of it. But then once you do the door bump again, we were able to fly up the stairs, hit the recon helmet, and trigger the next level. Things get a little bit fun when you get to Tayari Plaza. You can pretty much just fly through everything going through the normal route, which is fun. You do have to be careful from time to time not to bump into objects because those are going to be instant death obstacles to get around. Ever there, you just want to fly straight to Dare and open up the drop pod and try not to have everyone crash and die at the same time, starting the entire level over like we did in one of our practice runs. As far as tricks were concerned, our last trick we really pulled off was just here on this first part of Mombasa Streets after Tayari Plaza, where essentially doing the same trick at the door, one player can walk into this window while the other players die and they will respawn in the window, and then if another player respawns on the player stuck in the window, they'll drop down, bypassing the entire exit of the building. From here, it definitely helps knowing where you're going, because now you're gonna have to navigate through Mombasa Streets incredibly quickly, and one wrong turn can cost you a couple of seconds. More often than not, for whatever reason, Dim just has Mombasa Streets memorized like the back of his hand, and he was down to join us on this speedrun, which was really cool. And for the most part, he led us from point to point across all of the Mombasa Streets levels. We won't spend too much time talking about the individual Mombasa Streets levels because they're all really short anyways, but just the big thing to know is knowing where you want to go, and also if you're lost, don't just fly around randomly because you could teleport your team the wrong way, and don't slam into doors. Uplift Reserve is interesting. Now, typically there's faster ways of completing this level that speedrunners have found, but for the sake of not trying to complicate things with certain tricks, we decided just to fly through it as quickly as possible. We did fly over the rock mound where a lot of people drive ghosts up and over to save some time, and other than that, this was one of the fastest levels in all of ODST. Kazingo Boulevard was next, and this one is actually not too bad, especially if you know to target all of the scarabs, vehicles, and brutes in this courtyard as soon as you get there. We probably could have paid a little bit more attention as to what actually triggers this door opening over here, but for the most part, we just tried to go as fast as possible and just hope for the best. There's a longer firefight section you kind of have to sit your way through, but still we're able to clear through this level in about 3 minutes and 50 seconds, which wasn't too bad. Oni Alpha Site's another interesting level because you would think there'd be so many shortcuts you could do being able to fly around. Really, there's not all that many. Now, with the inclusion of the bandana skull and the acrophobia skull on, we also did turn on the So Angry skull, which was originally introduced just for Halo 2 Anniversary, but essentially makes it where enraged brutes will kill themselves in like a grenade explosion. It doesn't pop up too often that we notice an easy difficulty, but it is worth noting here that it probably helped in instances where we didn't realize it more often than not. Either way, we fly around, hit the remote things, turn on the bridge explosion. It blasts everyone while there's still Marines on there. Too bad for them. We would fly to the back and we would immediately start trying to take out as many enemies as we could as soon as they start dropping in, specifically focusing on large enemies and wraiths. Fortunately, the bandana skull gives us unlimited Spartan laser ammo, which is really helpful here. And when we were heading inside, we were making sure to pick up the rocket launcher as well, because during the firefight section, it kind of only moves along as quickly as you can kill the enemies, which meant a lot of grenade spamming doors and shooting at enemies as soon as they dropped in. You can't actually skip the elevator sequence even if you fly straight up to the top, so you have to wait for the elevator to fly and land, but you can try to quickly kill all the enemies on the rooftop to make the Pelican come and pick you up faster, and you can kind of fly towards the Pelican and try to get in a second quicker. Whether it works is kind of debatable. NMPD HQ is all about speed here. Knowing your way through this level is incredibly helpful because you can fly around some parts of the outside but not other parts, so knowing when to fly inside is important, and getting yourself across the long bridge is also important. From there, it's just a matter of shooting down stuff as fast as possible to make sure that the loading sequences are constantly moving. There's one Phantom you have to be careful not to shoot down too quickly, but we've never run into that problem before, so we were good to go, and we're feeling okay enough about our overall 4:33 time on this level. Next up was Kikawani Station, one of the levels that we flagged that we had to be incredibly careful on because this level is very brutal with respawns on co-op, and since we're flying around, the chances of us crashing into something already is really high, and it's just the larger space almost seems to make us want to fly into objects more often than not. But yeah, you definitely don't want to die on this level because respawning is already a pain, and also if you end up missing a checkpoint, which is very likely in a speedrun of this level, you get thrown back quite a ways. Now there are a lot of out of bounds glitches that are commonplace in the more hardcore ODST speedruns, but for the sake of what we were just trying to learn and practice right away and get our foot in the door, we just went the standard route through the level, pretty much just trying to hit all the door switches as fast as possible. We had it in one of our practice runs where we completely lost everything because we had died right before the scarab and one player was left. I think it was me, and I was flying in to end the level, and I blew up one of those squid houses to trigger the end of the level, and they all exploded in chain reaction, killing me. And ever since then I remembered you have to be very careful when taking out the squid houses. But we ended up submitting a 3:53 time on this level, which was something we were pretty happy with. Data Hive is one of the more linear levels, and the main thing is just trying to go as fast as possible and clearing out required enemies for doors to open. But when you get to these hallways here, knowing when to turn left and when to turn right can be a massive time save. So if one player is just dedicated to knowing their lefts and rights to navigate through here and can call it out for whoever's in first place, can be super helpful. Dim accidentally died hitting the wall when he was leading the way, but he knew the route and was able to tell whoever was in the front which way they were supposed to go, and that saved us a lot of time of just stopping, spinning around, and looking for the entrance to the next hallway. At the end of the level, there is a brute chieftain who has invincibility, but we learned that with that So Angry Skull, if we aggro him for whatever reason, as soon as his invincibility goes away, he just explodes. So that made getting rid of him pretty easy. Maybe if we were better with assassinations, that would have worked too, but at least we had one instance of the So Angry Skull coming in handy. We got Virgil. Everybody would fly ahead while one person stayed back just to make sure Virgil didn't die to something dumb. We used fire grenades on the buggers to clear them out quickly, and fire grenades in general are just really fun to throw with unlimited amounts of them. And this level was cleared in 7 minutes 3 seconds. Now going into Coastal Highway though, this was the other level that we had flagged as a don't mess up and wipe as a team level, because we've had it where we were making good progress, but since we're going fast, we never had a checkpoint at a good point, and we ended up losing all of our progress in one of our practice runs. Now there is a really cool speedrunning trick on this level where you can launch a warthog out of bounds and then kind of break through a barrier and then drive the warthog out of bounds and get to the end of the level so much faster. We spent a good couple of hours practicing this trick, and for the life of us could not make it happen. So while we knew there could have been a 4 or 5 minute time save, had we been able to figure it out, we just decided to try to progress as quickly as possible. They're still stuck waiting around for Dare's Oliphant to catch up a lot of the time, but still, for us making progress as quickly as we could, we would have been happy with any time under 20 minutes. So by the time we did finish this level with an 18-minute 11-second time, we said just send it and let's just see what happens and see if we can actually get a world record on Halo runs. Actually, while this would just be one full game world record we could go for, we also had the potential to go and submit all of our individual level times as well, as those are also categories on Halo runs, which put us in position to get maybe 9 total speedruns here, maybe 10, all with our names as world record holders. How exciting would that be? We submitted all of our times and we waited. We didn't really hear anything back. Then we checked in on the Halo Runs Discord, and as it turned out, there was actually some confusion with our run. Now, typically when you do any type of speedrun in Halo, you use the in-game timer by using the competitive time score setting in the settings. But when you do a run with skulls, the game disables the ability to use competitive time. But for our run, we had the timer on the screen, which caused some confusion because how did we get the timer on the screen? As it turned out, when I was setting up the game lobby, if you click A on this screen right here, it just bypasses the message that pops up telling you it doesn't work, and it gives you the chance to have a time on your screen. We kind of discovered something that nobody really knew about, maybe because nobody was really looking for it in the first place, but essentially the whole timing system for Halo 3 ODST Acrophobia was set up as something called an RTA run, which is essentially from the first frame of gameplay to the last frame of gameplay, with all of the loading times cut out of the game altogether, is your total time, not any in-game timer or combination of all of of your individual levels added together. Now, obviously, going off of the in-game time would be a lot easier, but with them not realizing that that was a glitch you can bypass and have the timer on the screen, the RTA rules were in place. So there was some confusion, but they did end up accepting our time, and we later noticed they actually ended up changing the rules for this specific run. Ultimately, we managed to beat Halo 3 ODST with Acrophobia Skull and some other skulls in 52 minutes and 45 seconds, which was something we're pretty happy of. Our first practice runs were over an hour, so we did trim off quite a bit of time, and that landed us 10 world records, which will likely be beat, especially after this video comes out. But hey, if it's one cool way to get more people interested in Halo runs, and we kind of set the bar at mid for new entry people to get their foot in the door in speedrunning, why not? And we're pretty happy about that as well. But you know what? We're awesome. Why stop at just 10 speedrun world records? What if we could get even more? Well, as it turned out, Halo 2 also had an Acrophobia co-op category. This one ended up being the absolute hardest out of any of our world record attempts, mostly because the Master Chief Collection likes to crash a lot on co-op, and that would be pretty much a run killer for us because the time loss of trying to set things up to continue on is just way too high. Now, once again, with Halo 2's Acrophobia co-op category, you're allowed to use any skulls you want, and of course, the Scarab Skull is in the game, which does make this a little more interesting, a little risky because we can obviously kill ourselves, but a little more interesting because we can wipe the room clean. We definitely had to practice this one more than any of the other ones, and also it was worth noting that since we had gone for our monopolized achievement all of those months back, we did kind of recall some speedrunning tricks that we used back then that were at least relevant this time around. Now, kicking things off right away, when Acrophobia was added to Halo 2, I just decided to go and explore around, and one thing I found was if you quickly fly into Miranda Keys' little train right here, you can actually glitch out of this room. There's like an invisible barrier that tries to keep you in, but you push through it, and it drops you into the next area, bypassing the entire section of the level where you have to wait for the Covenant to breach the door and fight through a couple of waves. So essentially, I was able to zoom through there and teleport Luke with me to the staircase here, and from there, we just had to quickly use the Scarab gun to clear out the enemies. We move up into the next room, clear out the enemies there, wait for the little thing to explode, and then we head into the little tunnel area, flying up, zooming past everything possible, and trying to get to the space section as fast as we could. We then flew through the door. Quickly, we would try to fly down below the elevator and take out the enemies if we could in there by punching them as fast as possible. Sometimes we did get stuck and messed up on our time save here, but for the most part, it was a pretty smooth trick. Once all the enemies were cleared, it would move us to the next section of the level, opening up the space area again. We would fly to the final elevator, and once we were in the elevator, we had to clear the room, which was just a couple of Scarab shots, and we just kind of stood by the bomb, hoping we did in fact kill everything, and the level would end. Still, we're pretty happy with a 3:21 time for Cairo Station. Outskirts was a cruise. We literally just flew up, over, through the bridge, and that level was done in 1:53. It was pretty straightforward. And Metropolis, we did run into a couple of problems throughout various attempts of practicing or trying to actually get a time for our overall run. Our first time running through, we had no real problems with it. We had a decent time, we felt good about it, but when we came back later on other runs where we would try to get a good time, we kept running into problems where, for whatever reason, something would go wrong. One time we had it where the level just straight up crashed randomly when we were shooting our Scarab guns, and then we also had a time where we were on board the Scarab, and then for whatever reason it despawned, and the level just soft locked. Yeah, that wasn't fun. Apparently there's this known glitch with Halo 2 where if you complete it too quickly or whatever, the Scarab will just not be there. It'll just despawn once it gets around the corner. So you have to pace yourself out a little bit, which is really interesting to think about for a Halo game, just having that weird mechanic of beating it too quickly where it breaks like this. Really frustrating whenever this would happen, and it would pretty much be a reset of our run. We did eventually make our way to the level Arbiter, which is another level you have to kind of watch out for. You just have to mostly remember that at the end area, before you get in the Banshee, you want to make sure that one player who doesn't get the door that triggers, because these doors are random 50-50 chance that they will open, whichever player doesn't get the door needs to jump in a Banshee to cause the Phantom to move up, while the player who's faster can fly straight to the end of the level, and if timed correctly, you can save a little bit of time by delegating these roles out. Oracle is a slog of a level. You have to kill 2 of these grunts right away so that they don't waste extra time screaming when the hologram thing comes up. We also noticed that sometimes our elites would dilly-dally and not just move along, causing the hologram to be delayed. So we wanted to make sure we were sticking with them and kind of showing them the way, not getting too far ahead where they kind of get lost on their own. It's a dumb little thing, but we did have a time where it just took them a really long time for whatever reason. Then we get to the elevator section. This part is rough because you can't just fly ahead to the next area. You do have to ride it out most of the way, at least until you hit the final loading zone towards the bottom. Then you can jump down and not hit a death barrier and fly into this firefight area. The firefight area is another huge time sink. You're just waiting around for enough waves of blood to spawn, and there's not too much we could find, at least, to speed this process along. We did eventually try to split up and go up onto the upper areas, which did make things move a little bit quicker, seemingly, but ultimately it's a slow fight here. Flying outside, we remembered to kill all of the enemies in the indoor area, and also skip this cutscene because we don't want anything to crash like we've had happen on lasso runs or other legendary speedruns. Then there's this quick elevator trick, which is pretty easy to pull off. You just have one person activate the elevator and call it back down. The other player just bounces way up. It gives you guys invincibility, and then that player just has to cut the cables while the other player waits, and then they have to just time when they drop back down, wait a couple of seconds after they cut the last cable before actually dropping. And if you do correctly, boom, you have invincibility and you're moving along pretty quickly, especially with the weird gravity stuff. We flew through the next part of the level, did the little Banshee thing. Don't jump out of the Banshee, you will die. And we chased the heretic all the way indoors, and as long as you know which one the heretic is, he's the back one, you can just sort him twice on easy difficulty, and he was dead. Wasn't too bad. Delta Halo was an interesting journey. We were feeling pretty good about our run at this point, and we had Delta Halo in the bag. We knew this level very well, at least we thought we did from when we were doing our monopolized achievement, and we thought with acrophobia it'll only be easier. It wasn't. We don't fully understand what went wrong, but every single time we were trying to progress through this level, we would miss one of the loading zones that you're supposed to hit in order to sequentially hit them where the end enemies spawn in, which are essentially the trigger to end the level. Now, we thought we were going the right order when we flew through part of the level correctly, but for whatever reason, the waterfall section that Luke normally triggers wasn't hitting the chapter sequence like it normally does, where the text pops up on the screen. And other times when I was going through the temple, it wouldn't hit the chapter sequence either. So we ended up soft locking this level on multiple runs of ours when we were playing through this. Really frustrating to get all the way to Delta Halo to have a dead run, especially after playing through all of Oracle. So it was pretty heartbreaking to get defeated here on our first timed attempt. So we ended up having to start all the way over at Cairo and run through all of the levels again. But eventually we did figure out to be more careful to make sure we're hitting all the loading sequences, and all the little text things that pop up on the screen indicating you hit the loading sequences did in fact pop up and in order. That makes a big difference, and even if it took us a couple extra seconds than doing more risky plays, it ended up being worth it for the overall cost of the run. Regret is an interesting one, and it's a fun one to get to use the acrophobia skill on. You can essentially just fly straight out of the first room, go straight over to where the first building is. We were a little cautious since our experience on Delta Halo to try to hit some loading sequences if necessary, or split up and have one person hit the button on the gondola just to make sure nothing fell apart. But we just kind of flew through everything and cleared out the enemies in the water elevator room. We waited for the elevator to come up, we went on a little elevator ride that you can't skip, and then we just cruised through the bottom area, getting to another elevator as quickly as possible. And then once you get out of the elevator, you can fly straight to Regret. As long as you activate the little cutscene when you stand right around here, you're good to go on that. And then you just bash his face in a few times, wait a couple seconds, and this level can be cleared. A 533 on Regret is absolutely crazy to us, and it's just a fun level to get to speedrun, considering how long this level typically is when played the normal way. So, feeling good, we were on to Sacred Icon, and this level has a lot of little droppy things that you can speed up if you fly straight down through. They're kind of fun, but also a little tedious. And then there's these long stretches that are really fun to fly through. I don't know why. Also, it's worth noting on Halo 2, you don't have the same collision damage that you have in Halo ODST or even Halo 3. So if you hit a wall, more often than not, you don't end up dying nearly as easily as you do in Halo 3 and ODST. So it was nice to already have that, and it helps on this level. Being able to quickly take out those giant sentinel things, enforcers I think they're called, those are always fun. And then we just kind of do a little short gondola ride and then fly as quickly as we can through the end of the level. We go through this cave to make sure we trigger the last sequence and loading part of the level, and then we just fly up high and shoot at all of the flood as quickly as we can to get this level to end as fast as possible. So finally, we made it this far. We're going on to Quarantine Zone, which is already known for being a level that you can kind of cruise through pretty quickly. We knew the driving routes before, so we felt optimistic. We know from practicing this level that you do, in fact, have to drive a ghost to get this door open. So we did that, flew through, continued going as quickly as we could. We're making really good time. But then by the time we got to the gondola, for whatever reason, the level didn't cut to the regular cutscene it does to start the gondola sequence, and just nothing happened. We walked up, we could press the button, which was weird, but we were kind of stuck here. We tried reverting to last checkpoint, and we didn't have any luck. So this ended up killing one of our runs at one point, and then on another instance when we were getting really good time, we soft locked again here, and essentially while we knew we would end up either having to restart everything all over again, we decided to try to take the 3 or so minute penalty that we had already invested into this level and just go ahead and kill ourselves to try to double revert, which isn't too hard when you have bandana skull on and a scarab gun. When we double reverted, it took us back to the beginning of the level. This time around, we were much more careful to try to figure out what was going on and causing this level not to load correctly. And what we kind of did to check it was make sure that there was always enemies around. If there was no enemies, things were getting sus and we might have missed a loading point. I ended up flying all the way back when we realized that there was no enemies towards the end of the level on our actual run here. And I found out that we missed a loading sequence inside of this crashed ship or building or whatever it is. That then spawned all the enemies over by Luke, and then Luke flew ahead and was in fact able to trigger the gondola cutscene. Now, typically in speedruns, the gondola is just a ride where runners can take a break, go get something to drink, and just chill for a couple of minutes. But you can in fact fly with acrophobia through the entire course of the gondola. If you fly ahead, you do seem to fly much slower than normal with acrophobia on this section for whatever reason, but you can fly ahead and get to these giant doors and just force your way through the door by kind of sitting at the middle and waiting until you can see your camera in your head clipped through one of the walls, and it just lets you fly right through. The second wall behind it is a little weird. We noticed if we just floated in front of the wall for a minute, it would eventually just let us clip through it and load us into another section. And then we just kind of flew up, but once you get into the area where you get off the gondola, you can pretty much just run straight through the little tunnel entrance that you have to walk through normally, and you can get this level cleared. Okay, then we were on to Gravemind. When we practiced Halo 2 speedrunning with acrophobia on, this level was a run killer because we had missed a loading zone. So we were very careful this time around to make sure we didn't miss any loading zones, especially after doing a full run getting this far. And we just killed everything as fast as we could. We flew very low to the ground, trying to stay along the path a normal player would. We did do the elevator skip that lets you skip the entire prison section by flying all the way down to where the loading zone hits and then just flying up. The gravity will naturally lift you back up and you can bypass all of the prison area. And once again, we made sure to stay close-ish to the actual path that players typically take. And we were using enemies once again as an indicator if we had flown too far, because we didn't want to miss anything. We made sure we constantly could see that enemies were loading in as normal. With that, by the time we made it to the final room, there's a ton of enemies there, and we used our scarab guns to clear it. We actually got a 4-minute 55-second Gravemind, which was something we were really proud of. With just 3 levels left in Halo 2, 2 of these are incredibly interesting because you can beat them practically the second you load into the level. On Uprising, if you fly straight up out of bounds and you go over to this cliff ledge and crouch here, the level just automatically ends. So we were able to get a 21-second uprising. And on High Charity, the next level, if you fly around here, just be careful about death barriers, and you fly straight to this beam of light, it'll automatically trigger the end of the level as well, which was done in just 15 seconds for us. So all that was left for us was to complete the Just Okay journey. Now, there are a couple of little things you can do to save time, but ultimately a lot of this is kind of just waiting for Johnson and his giant scarab to walk through. The beginning part's not too bad. You just fly ahead, kill everything as quickly as you can, fly through all these little rooms and hallways, make your way up top, free all of your buddies. And then when you get to the Johnson part, we ran backwards real quick to do a despawn where there won't be drivers in the wraiths down below. Now, in some cases, speedrunners push Johnson with their banshees to try to get him to move along. We didn't notice this actually was making any difference whatsoever, but we tried it anyways. And then once Johnson shoots the door open, I was in the same area you typically would do the duplication glitch, which bypasses this little entrance area you normally go through, and it just saves a couple of seconds. Then we got to the boss fight, and we just kind of were quick with energy swords. On our practice run, we tried killing Tartarus with the scarab guns, but it wasn't really all that effective. It just maybe caused more debris to be a hazard to us. And we discovered that our best bet was to use the energy sword and just try to stab him as much as possible, which did give us a much faster boss fight time. We ultimately cleared this level in 7 minutes 9 seconds, making our overall Halo 2 time 57 minutes and 50 seconds. And our goal was to get it done in under 1 hour, so we felt pretty good about that. So next up, we had to choose. We could either do Halo Combat Evolved, which doesn't have a dedicated Acrophobia skull in the Master Chief Collection just yet. You can mod it in the PC version, and they do accept Acrophobia times on Halo runs, but we like Halo 3, so we were just really excited and wanting to play Halo 3, so we jumped on that as fast as we could. Maybe we were a little too hasty in the afterthought of this. Nonetheless, we'll go through Halo 3 pretty quickly here because our run is actually really similar to our beating Halo 3 too fast video. There weren't that many time skips or massive saves we did here. We just went through Halo 3 pretty quickly. Sierra 117 was first, and between this level and Crow's Nest, we had a lot of resets of things just not going well or not going according to plan. Sierra 117, we kept running into this issue where when we got to the end of the level, for whatever reason, Sergeant Johnson just wasn't there. We don't know what we were doing wrong. We would get there and he just wasn't there. Sometimes this brute would not see him. Sometimes he was there and he just wouldn't like interact with us or do anything. We tried to spend a little bit of time figuring out the right combination of speed and time to figure out what we needed to do to make sure we hit all the loading sequences to make sure Johnson was there at the end of the level, but also not waste too much time either. The big thing that we did discover that made a difference is that if we skipped this Cortana interaction that normally happens in a cave, for whatever reason, the whole crashing pelican sequence would line up faster and Johnson would more often than not show up at the end. But if we hit that sequence and then went too fast, Johnson wouldn't be there at the end. We don't know how this works, but eventually we had an okay time and we moved on to Crow's Nest, another level that caused us to restart a couple of times. Doing this one after Halo 2 when we were used to not having that collision definitely didn't help, and when we both died at the brute jetpack part, we ended up getting set back so far that we ended up resetting again, running Sierra 117 a couple more times. Eventually we would power through and fly through the rest of Crow's Nest, just trying to maneuver back and forth through that level as fast as we could. Using those fire bombs are pretty nice for clearing out waves of enemies. Once again, Halo 3 is just fun to use fire bombs. But after that, things were pretty smooth sailing for a big portion of Halo 3. It's not that complicated and definitely a really easy entry Acrophobia co-op challenge to jump into. Savo Highway, you can just fly through the path you normally would with the Warthog, just faster and acrophobic. At the end of the level, if you blow up this shade turret and break this, you can despawn all of the brutes, and from there you're able to auto trigger the end of the level. The storm, we managed to fly a little too quick through the tunnels and had to backtrack just for a couple of seconds to make sure all the enemies were loading so that this button would actually work. But other than that, it was more or less simple. We just flew around killing the enemies as quickly as we could, those wraiths as fast as possible. We did have to wait what seemed like an exceedingly long time for the scarab to finally come in, but it did show up and we took it it out pretty much immediately and flew on to the end of the level as fast as possible. When you get to Floodgate, one of two things is going to happen to you when you run this. You're either going to zoom through it very well, or you're going to be watching your friends zoom through it really well because you flew at too fast of a speed into a wall and died. And since this level's so short, probably aren't going to actually get respawned back into this and get to play. For both the Ark and the Covenant, we ended up just going really fast through the levels. The main thing we would try to do is if there's a sequence where you're typically supposed to walk or drive, we would occasionally touch down on the grass or the sand to make sure that the game was still kind of moving along regularly with its loading sequences. We didn't really run into any problems on the Ark. We had a little bit of a worrisome moment when we got to the Scarab, but we were able to take it out. We also killed this Marine to bypass the little dialogue that happens with Guilty Spark here, where he stings the Marine. Then we flew through here, we pressed the button, and we flew through here, and we ended the level. And we were on to the Covenant, where we flew quickly, bypassing all the enemies on the beach, inside the tower. We made our way up, we killed the brutes. Once again, the So Angry Skull just makes fighting the brute chieftains that have invincibility kind of silly. We flew back down, and then before you're able to fly past the Hornet section, you do have to jump in a Hornet to trigger the barriers switching on the level, which we need to do. We did that, we flew ahead, and we just kind of cruised through the whole next part, much like we did the first part. Taking out the Scarabs was interesting. We split up to do it, though I struggled a little bit on my Scarab. Then in the indoor section, we ran into a big problem. This has happened to us before with Acrophobia, and it's just something to heed warning to if you're going to try to speedrun Halo 3 Acrophobia co-op. When you're zooming through, your loading sequences are very specific in this area, and it's very possible to fly past a loading sequence even if you're literally just steps away or inches away from what would normally trigger it. We got lucky flying in, not having any of our loading sequences break, but on the exit, we had multiple times in just this little section where our loading sequences didn't hit correctly, and we had to walk back and forth trying to figure out where we missed it. And then we had missed another one after that, thinking we had hit enough to end the level, to find that the level didn't end. And we ended up just going back and forth an excessive amount of times to get through that, but we did end up still clearing the level with a fast enough-ish time. If we really wanted to go back and trim our Halo 3 times down even more, this would probably be the level we would have done it on. Next, we were going on to Cortana, and this was a level where we really wish we had Dim running with us that night, because Dim just knows the ins and outs of some of these Halo levels better than Luke and I do, and this is one of those levels you can get turned around really easily on. Fortunately enough, I think Luke and I did okay for flying through this, but we definitely did make a couple of wrong turns here and there, and I think towards the end of the level, we were just completely lost until I just stumbled upon the Pelican, and I'm like, oh, I made it. And then going into the final level of Halo 3, at first I was kind of having my mindset that I needed to go get the Spartan laser from Sergeant Johnson to get the unlimited Spartan laser, but we had the bandana still on, so first of all, I didn't need to even get an unlimited version of the gun, but also we have fire grenades, and those things are super effective, and it's on easy difficulty. So we came to our senses and just started throwing those around, and that actually got through the whole firefight section pretty fast. We went inside, we took care of Guilty Spark, and then we thought about taking the Warthog and doing the drive, but we realized that'd be so much longer, and also we thought about just flying straight to Dawn, but we did realize that that would miss some loading sequences, and there might even be some barriers in the way. There is probably a trick to go from the side angle and do it faster, but we weren't really sure of it, and we didn't want to waste time testing things. So we ended up flying straight through the regular pathway, which was still pretty fast in itself, much faster than driving a Warthog, and we're able to complete all of Halo 3 with a 55-minute, 11-second time. Honestly, we were pretty sure we were going to run this again after this run, even though this was a decent enough time for us. But when we went to submit our time, we realized that Halo Runs doesn't actually have a co-op Acrophobia category. We kind of misread it and assumed that since Halo 3 ODST and Halo 2 all have these co-op Acrophobia categories, so would Halo 3. But apparently Halo 3 only has this Any Skulls category, but it only applies for solo play. So that was a little disappointing. We did inquire about the possibility of them adding the category, but I don't think anyone understands what I'm talking about on the Halo Runs Discord, because I'm just kind of such a noob when it comes to speedrunning. I can see why I got disregarded. So Now, nonetheless, while there's technically not a Halo Runs official leaderboard for Halo 3 co-op Acrophobia, we're gonna start our own miniature leaderboard with a Google Doc over on our Discord server. So while we recommend anyone who is trying to go for Acrophobia speedruns on their own to definitely submit their times onto Halo Runs because the community is great there, if you are going to submit a Halo 3 run, just come over to our Discord and we'll set up a channel for it until maybe one day Halo Runs gets an official co-op any percent category or Acrophobia run. Okay, at this point, we're kind of having a lot of fun looking into different strategies for speedrunning, and Uplift Reserve's kind of one of my favorite ODST levels, and there's a really cool strategy you can do to bypass that entire level pretty much and save maybe 10 to 15 seconds with Acrophobia. It's not that much, but it was intriguing nonetheless. Essentially at the beginning of the level, if you jump in a Warthog, drive it up here, you can only have one person in the Warthog when you do this, otherwise it's too heavy, and you jump out at the right angle, you can bypass an invisible barrier, and then you can fly up, out, and over, and fly straight through the deloaded level to the end of the level and trigger the final cutscene, which saves, once again, 10 to 15 seconds. We did end up doing that, beating our own time and submitting it, but I was proud of it. So we got one more world record that we dethroned ourselves on to keep, and that was neat. Ultimately, this was really fun. We ended up getting in total, if we count our Halo 3 times, which doesn't have a category anywhere else, so we're technically the first, we would have something like 21 or 22 overall speedruns, which obviously these are kind of meme runs. But if you look at the bigger picture of the speedrunning community, any percent runs are a very common speedrunning category. It's very surprising how Halo Runs hasn't had a larger community for this specific niche. And I think a lot of people either who are already in the speedrunning community or who are new and wanting to find a new way to get their foot in the door that doesn't already have years and years of study and expertise behind some of the tricks, this might be a really cool category to try out for the first time. We're very confident we're gonna get dethroned from most of these records after this video goes out, and that's completely fine. It was more just kind of about the journey of getting to, even if for a short bit, claim some first place titles and act like we're some big shots because we are sensational. But ultimately, we just had a really fun time going for this and doing this, and that's kind of what it was mostly about. More people should play Halo co-op anyways, especially the good ones. Hey, if you like this video though, hit the like button, maybe leave a comment with some dumb joke or something. I don't know, feed the algorithm a little bit. If you have any recommendations of other co-op games you'd like to see Luke and I try to go get records for, let us know. Otherwise, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. Apparently that sometimes helps. But that's it for today. We'll see you all next time with a brand new video.